I think we are ready.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to our workshop. I'm going to go ahead and share the slides and just continuing to have people enter the waiting room. And Kerstin, you can take it away.
All right, welcome, everybody. As I mentioned, some of you have seen this link already like 15 times by now, it seems. I have put the Google slide link in there. So we have a lot of slides and presumably won't have time for everything. So if you feel so inclined, go ahead and watch some of the videos and read some of the slides that we don't have time for. And it's there for you to use. So you should have access to that. Our presentation is called Beyond Accommodations, How Embracing Non-Apparent Disabilities Benefits Everyone. And this is our agenda. You're gonna see real quick, we're gonna give some background, talk a little bit about ableism, common barriers, some buzzwords in the disability community. And we wanna focus on the strengths and recommendations and some resources for you as well. So I'm going to talk real quick. I'm on the right, Kerstin sabbatical. So I had a sabbatical A for this project. And the two main goals were really to take community college classes as a student with disabilities myself. So I took a class here at CRC, and I took 2 classes at LA City College. And it was really interesting that they are very different experiences that I wasn't aware of. The offices are called different names. They're not called DSPS in LA, for example. They're called OSS. They're called Office of Special Services. And it was pretty interesting to see how it was handled in different colleges and how the whole process worked. And I think both offices did not know that I was faculty, so I was treated like any other student, I think. And so through reading and some research, some interviews, and my own experiences, the goal was to find best practices for teaching students with hidden disabilities. And what we mean with that is that it's kind of a controversial term, because is it actively hidden or not? But it's the ones that you don't see right away. So you look at somebody and don't right away know that there is a disability or several disabilities involved, like a wheelchair, for example. There were some other parts, but they don't belong to this project. Lesley, go ahead.
Yeah, so Kerstin and I are both in the English department at CRC, and we separately applied for our sabbaticals, actually. I didn't know Kerstin was applying. She didn't know I was applying. Anastasia let us know, she's one of the chairs of professional standards, that we had a lot of crossover. My sabbatical was 40%. And so she connected us, and Kerstin and I collaborated on some parts of this sabbatical, especially when it came to meeting with people at CRC or within the district, that we were both in the room. I am the mother of an autistic son who was diagnosed in the early 2000s. And at that time, I did a ton of research about autism and best practices for young children. And I realized in my own classes, when students, I teach writing, when I would read about their experience being autistic, being ADHD, on the neurodivergent spectrum, that I wasn't connecting with them like I thought I automatically would as a mother of an autistic college student. And so I knew that I wanted to really create an environment in my classroom in which I understood what their needs were, their preferences, and to learn the most recent research. And most of the research that I did is 2022 or more recent.
This is a quick list of people that have helped us out. They took the time without any sabbatical or anything to talk to us. Many are from CRC, and there's a couple there's one from Sac City, the CSUS, and LA as well. And of course, we also talked to some students. So thank you very much. A lot of the interviews we did together, Lesley and I. The current, Lesley, you want to go, I think.
So we have some statistics here about disabilities in general, and some specific to neurodivergent disabilities. And if you want to just take a look at the numbers, you may be surprised by the percentage or the fraction of people who fall into these categories. This one here, half of Generation Z, which is most of our students right now, born between 1997 and 2012, identifies as not neurodivergent. And Kerstin, am I still talking about the other bullet points too?
Oh, if you think
Okay.
they're important, otherwise I think you can read them through. There's a lot of numbers and a lot of impressive numbers.
Oh, that's right. Okay, so the fourth bullet point I think is also really important to see, that 65% of students with a reported disability in high school do not disclose the disability in college. So we have a lot of students with disabilities in our classes that may not have DSPS paperwork.
Yeah, that's a good point. Own experiences, you might have already kind of gathered or guessed what that was all about. With my background is I suddenly had a hemorrhage stroke in last spring, not this spring, but the spring before, 23. And I really went from one day being able-bodied to disabled. I could barely talk, and I had to learn walking again and everything. And so I really became interested in the community, in a disability community, and kind of did a lot of research about it a little bit, and I continued doing that in the sabbatical. CRC is offering for the first time a social justice course, and it's called 320 Intro to Disability Studies, and I prepped for that during the sabbatical, so it's on campus. It's an online class right now. It's full, if you're wondering if you want to join it, but it's full. Like I said before, I worked with the CRC and LSCC offices to receive accommodations, and also I fell under non-apparent disabilities because it took me about 2 or 3 months to walk again, and after about 3 months, I didn't have any wheelchair or walker or anything that would obviously show that I was disabled. With the accommodations, I was able to take a fitness class here at CRC, Korean 3 at LA, and ASL 40 Introduction to Deaf Culture also at Los Angeles. And that's partially because LA has a winter semester, like a semester when we have winter break, and that kind of fit very well. I was able to fit another class in. And I think I was treated as a student. Most of my teachers at least didn't know that I was faculty. So it was also interesting to see how certain assessments worked for me or didn't work for me, or what the teachers would do that would actually be easier for me, or make the class less challenging. Lesley.
So there were some really, in my experiences of researching, I was able to speak with some students who identified as neurodivergent, and that's because they wrote about it in a free write or an essay. And I was able to learn about their experiences. What really was the tipping point for me to apply for a sabbatical to do this research. A year ago, spring, in my British literature class, I had 3 young men who let me know through different ways, not through DSPS paperwork, that they were autistic. And they struggled in my class, and that kind of surprised me. And I used some of the things that they wrote about to kind of create questions that I wanted to research to give students like them a more positive experience. They, a couple of them would regularly, let's say I had a 500-word short writing assignment. Maybe they would write 3 or 4 sentences and then say, I have nothing else to say about this topic. And they were super smart, but obviously I was not presenting the material in a way that appealed to them or that connected with them. And so as we go further into this workshop, we'll see some of the recommendations that we have that I actually implemented this last spring, and with all of my classes, and felt a lot better about the experiences that my neurodivergent students were having. This is just, we had the opportunity to go to a variety of conferences and workshops related to our sabbaticals. And
go ahead.
Yeah.
Jesse. Go ahead.
So a really important word when we're talking about disabilities is ableism. And so this definition of ableism is either subtly or directly portraying individuals who are being defined by their disability as inherently inferior to non-disabled people. So a lot of it is implicit bias, that you see someone who looks to be a person with a disability, and you automatically have a deficit viewpoint about them. These examples at the bottom, I think, are really good. Telling someone that they don't look disabled as a compliment is definitely ableism. Treating a disabled person as lesser than or as a child. Viewing disabled people as inspirational solely or in part on the basis of their disability. So that's kind of like, we see how they're excelling and it makes us feel good. And that's kind of how we're viewing them, their personhood.
Why does accessibility matter? The point is everybody can benefit. Accessibility refers to enabling access for a wider range of people, whether it's a product, a device, an environment, or services. And we have seen with the numbers that so many of the students do not disclose that they have a disability, which means they don't get the paperwork from DSPS, which means you as a faculty don't know what you have to accommodate, what they should get get extra time, etc. So there's a few things that that we can do to maybe make it great for everybody. So it really helps with the diversity of our students. So this is a quick video that I came across in one of my courses, and I thought it was really interesting. This is a video about somebody who has low vision. And the first 75 seconds are really helpful to kind of give you a feel how that might look for that person. And you can maybe see how frustrating this kind of disability or challenge is for somebody, and how much it really affects how they learn. It has nothing to do with whether they know something or don't know something. It's really about just getting it on, getting there, just seeing it. So could you play it? I think.
Did you want to play it?
Either way. Whatever you.
Okay, I'm going to, is it okay if you share? Because
Yeah.
mine it has ads on it.
I think I should be without ads, hopefully. So let me know if you can see and hear it. So, okay.
Yep.
Let's see. Can you hear the music?
No, we
No.
cannot.
Um,
Remember when you share it that you need to enable it as a video with the audio.
yeah, I'm not sure what I'm doing here. Let me see. What did I do?
If you stop sharing and then reshare, it should give you the share sound option.
I'm not sure if I, oh, here's stop sharing, yeah. Okay. And where should it give me the sound option?
When you go back to share the screen, right before you actually click on the screen you're going to share, it should say like share sound somewhere.
At the bottom of the dialog box.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you, it does. Thanks. Okay, second try. Let's do that. Where are we? This one. Working now?
Portland Community College # Mozilla Firefox. Portland Community College. Portland. Tab. Do not show me this dialog box again. Checkbox not checked. The check press tab. Yes button to activate. Press space. My PCC vertical tab. Skip navigation tab. Portal logo graphic tab. Tag dot render.
Imagine that you're trying to do homework online and this is what you had to deal with.
Tab. Email tab. Groups tab. Help tab. Log tab. My piece tab. My code tab.
I'm sight impaired and I have RP, which is retinitis pigmentosa, and it's as if I'm looking through straws. For a sighted student, they can just see what's there on the page and click on whatever they need, and they can go back and forth to the syllabus and back to the page very easily. I have to navigate back and forth and run up and down the page with a JAWS program that takes a lot longer.
I just wanted you to see the beginning of this because this is a longer video that you can watch. I thought it was interesting because I never thought about that as much. I teach a lot of times online and I didn't know that a person just could see that little, or I didn't understand that really, how frustrating that could be. So I thought that video was interesting. So in the slides, if you go back, what they also did is I listed barriers that are common based on specific disabilities, but please notice that those are common. That means they're not always there. Some people might have others. You need to be aware that disabilities are overlapping and challenges overlap. But you can take a look at these, especially when you know from a student that they have a specific disability, they're willing to share that with you. They don't have to, but if they're willing to share it with you, not by you asking, but just like somehow it comes up, then you can look this up and think a little bit more about it. There's a video, the next slide, we have a video about color blindness. It's very short. It just gives you an overview of how they see the world. And it's also kind of interesting to see like how difficult it can be to really distinguish colors. So for example, if you highlight things or you make a difference between certain words because of color, then it's like, it can be really difficult because it might look the same for the same people. So same idea, specific color blindness barriers, like use color to convey meaning. inconsistent navigation, low contrast. That, for example, happens very, very often that with a presentation or anything, it's that the background and the font are of colors that don't really fit. Like, for example, the presentation style we chose for today was actually not automatically working as far as low contrast goes, good contrast goes, even though Google was offering it as an option. So I went ahead and changed it to blue instead of an orange because it would work with the differences better. And these are things that I automatically assumed that Google or PowerPoint or somebody would be smart enough to think about this. But there is a lot of design options are not accessible at all. Then we have deaf and hard of hearing. What I noticed is that a lot of times there are clues that are audio clues that actually don't really work for people that don't have an interpreter. The speed is often the issue. It's just like you should look at the board and at the interpreter, and it's just like somehow at the person who's speaking, and it's just like too much going on for a deaf or hard of hearing person, and I'm not sure that's always taken into consideration. Then there's barriers of mobility related disabilities. That's an issue. Even in an online class, don't just think wheelchair, think of a lot of challenges have to do with clicking certain buttons, being able to click the buttons, or clicking buttons that are by accident, and suddenly something is submitted and you just randomly bump the mouse or something like that. And it just takes much longer to go around with JAWS or something like that. Then we have barriers for cognitive learning and cognitive and learning disabilities. And it's just really hard if inconsistency exists. So if you might think like, oh, this is interesting, it looks nice. It's kind of like varied, right? Shouldn't I put the photo in there just for kicks? And it's like a lot of times harder because it's just not what they expect or what a student might expect. So time limit is always an issue. But you can read that up in the slides a little bit more, and I'll put the link in the chat again for those who came late. Lesley, go ahead.
Okay, so I have some terminology related to neurodiversity, and you can't have neurodiversity unless you have both neurotypical, which is a person who has not been diagnosed with or does not have a disability under the umbrella of neurodivergence. So you need both neurotypical and neurodivergent individuals to be able to talk about neurodiversity. So the definition for neurodivergent, this is one: having a mind that functions in ways that diverge significantly from the dominant societal standards of what is considered normal, for example. So there are several under that umbrella. I chose to focus on ADHD, ADD, dyslexia, and autism because I think those have the higher concentration of disabilities. And along those lines, I wanted to give some terminology, do's and don'ts. So you'll see that this is using the identity first. And in recent years, in disability studies in general, the identifier comes first. So instead of person with autism, it would be autistic person. Autistic person is the same as autist or autistic or on the autism spectrum. To describe a person, you would say they are disabled or have a disability as opposed to special needs, differently abled, is in the disabled community not okay, as well as handy capable. Neurotypical, we saw that earlier. Other similar terms are allistic, which is just a person who is not under the umbrella of neurodivergence. What you don't want to talk about is normal, as opposed to disabilities, has high support needs or low support needs, as opposed to low functioning and high functioning. And those terms, low functioning and high functioning, have been around for a long time. And it's, when my son was diagnosed as high functioning, I was happy about that. But for most of the information that we have here are coming from the disabled community and what their preferences are. Some of these are obvious, like you wouldn't call someone mute or dumb. We do have nonverbal autists, those who lose their speech. And I would say overall euphemisms, in other words, sugarcoating any kind of disability is not okay.
Well, we talked about a little bit already that accessibility would benefit everybody, not just the person with disabilities. So these are barriers that all students face, no matter who it is. So think of it, this works maybe especially in online classes, but it's typical to have text links that actually say things like click here. They don't work very well at all on, if you have a reader, some kind of program that reads the page to you, they can actually tab through and they can just go to the links. And if every link is like click here, click here, click here, how do they know which one they should actually like click on? So it's better to say like, okay, site, whatever the name is, or something like that. Overly complex content, that means like it's very, very busy. There's a lot of information on one page or slide or something like that. Inconsistent navigation, sometimes a discussion is here, or sometimes the lecture is here on the modules, but sometimes it's on the pages and things like that. It's like always a different way of entering. Inconsistent navigation with low contrast, I already talked about, and unstructured content, that it's like you have to have headings. That's like the number one thing that a program like JAWS wants. It's like you can click through headings in the order they're organized, like there's heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, heading 4, and so on. And it's like the value, like how important are they? Like the 2s are more important than the 3s, and so on. And you can actually see that when you click through it in such a program. So this can help anybody actually, even if you just look at a page, it helps to have headings. It's much nicer to have a heading or a couple of headings in there than just one long text. And for people with speech to reading, it's like, yeah, they need this. So another word that comes up in disability studies a lot is intersectionality. That really means that nobody is really just one minority or has one aspect that influences them. There's like several aspects are playing together. And so that means that everybody's individual, and I'm sure you're aware of that. So what that means for us is that there is no like common thing, like, oh, you have to do this, or you should always do this, or something. There's no always. It's always like, okay, try to talk to the individual, see the individual, and see how they play together, or think about how they could influence each other. Ethnicity, race, sexual orientation, more than one disability, socioeconomic groups, work and work status, citizenship, immigration, and religion are all aspects that play together. So you could, for example, argue that a white male wheelchair user is going to be treated slightly differently than an African American woman wheelchair user, even though they have the same disability. So they belong into different groups, kind of, and their life is affected by how others see them to belong into different groups. So keep that in mind, that nobody is just the disability. There's a lot of other things around it. Models of disability. You want to talk about that, Lesley, real quick?
Yeah, so when I was talking about diagnoses as high functioning or low functioning, that comes from a psychologist or psychiatrist or doctor. A lot of the designations, medical designations, are actually deficit designations. So, you know, ascribing certain pathologies, and once the individual receives a diagnosis, hoping for a cure to that diagnosis, is not something that in current times is okay with the disability community. In fact, a lot of the young adult neurodivergent writers that I've been reading and seeing on TikTok don't want to be cured. In other words, cured, it would be the medical term. They recognize that their brain works differently, but that doesn't mean their brain does not work as well. In many cases, it works better than neurotypical people. And so the medical model of disability is definitely an ableist model. And Kerstin, I think you were going to talk about social.
Yeah, these are actually all models of disability that kind of exist or are common. And we could say that the medical model is kind of the dominant one for people without disabilities, I would say. And currently the disability community is trying to go to the social model. So it's saying that the disability is not inside of the person, as in the medical model, but it's outside. That means the person is not really disabled, but society is labeling me as somebody who can't do certain things and has a word for that. And so there are some other models that focus on certain things, like the economic models, the human rights model, the religious model, or the cultural model. But most common right now are medical and social, I would say, in our kind of society. For the social model, like as I mentioned, it's created by society and is a form of social oppression. I moved on to 23, Lesley. And thank you. And sorry about that. Which results in the exclusion of people who have impairments. And the shift of the responsibility for inclusion should be on the society as a whole, not on the person with a disability. It's not their job to figure out how to do something and how to get something done, but it's the job of the society. There is like a rule, a way of doing things that is commonly accepted, and then somebody's kind of challenging that, and it should really be up to society to kind of take this challenge and make it accessible, make the whatever it is accessible to everyone. And so what do we need to do to ensure you can be included in your chosen activity instead of trying to fix something? Fixing is always a medical, just the term of fixing is a medical thing. There's a short video in case you're interested. It gives a short explanation of what a social model is. You can watch it on your own, obviously.
So as I mentioned before, identity first language is what is the preference currently. And I know that last semester, CRC hosted a showing of Crip Camp. And that's a reflection of the disability community reclaiming the word cripple for empowerment. And it's similar to the term queer, which would have maybe been in past decades not okay, but that community has embraced that term. The most important thing is to ask for individual preferences and how that individual would want to be identified. And Kerstin, I think you...
Yes, I wanted to talk about that.
Fluid.
Yeah, it's disability can often be from birth or early childhood, but it can often suddenly set on, like what happened with me, or it can come late in life. A lot of seniors might have mobility issues. Even the word issues, once again, a medical term, medical model of disability, but it can quickly change. So maybe it's just be aware of that, maybe that it's something that can happen to anybody, and it's not a minority that someone automatically is born into. There's also a lot of discussion about that, and I just thought that was funny. The last point was just a lot of people in the disability community have a name for people who don't have disabilities, and they're temporarily able-bodied, and they're called TAB, because I thought it was interesting. They're not just able-bodied, but temporarily able-bodied. I thought it was interesting.
Yeah. Earlier today, Kerstin and I were talking about the fluidity issue, and she used an example of you may have a neighbor woman who one day you see her in a wheelchair and the next day she's walking, and her disability is fluid. She can walk some days and other days she can't walk. The same is true in the neurodivergent community, that an autist could be functioning really well in school or at work for a week or 2 weeks, and maybe experiences extreme burnout and is unable to function for a few days.
Another common phrase, or like a buzz phrase in disability studies, is inspiration porn. I was coined about 10, 15 years ago, and it's connected with ableism. It's the idea that you're seeing a person with disabilities as noble inspiration to all of humanity just because of disability. The video is a short TEDx talk, about 9 minutes or something. Her name is Stella, and she's actually the person who coined that phrase. And so she's very funny, I think. It's like a comedy act, actually. And it's very funny. And she explains what happened when she came up with that term. And she explains that it was like, she was in school, middle school, or high school, and she was supposed to win an award. And she couldn't figure out why she was supposed to win an award, but her teachers have nominated her because she was like a typical teenager watching sitcoms and, you know, being interested in boys and things like that. But she was really like surprised. Her family was surprised. And then the point was that it was like, oh, you already survived so much because you have a disability. And she said, like, yeah, I've done nothing special, but everybody else kind of forces me to kind of be inspiration porn. Like they like to see me succeed, although it was nothing hard. Of course I can succeed in this. It's like you don't give everybody like the same expectations. You're like, oh, you achieved something even though you haven't achieved anything. Another common term also commonly refers to, for example, videos you might have seen a few years ago where it's like a baby or a child that can't hear gets a cochlear implant, and then with the therapist they suddenly figure, yeah, the kid can suddenly hear, and then it's suddenly like how they light up and the parents are super excited and everything is wonderful. And nothing against cochlear implants, it's everybody's individual choice. But the idea that other people want to watch that and feel good that that person can now hear goes with the medical model and ableism. So you can watch the video. It's pretty funny if you have time. Oh, that's me too. Dehumanification. So usually what we notice is common stereotypes outside the disability community is people with disabilities do not have human feelings and emotions. In essence, they're less than human. It's still persistent, but it really was bad past history-wise. They're unable to feel basic physical sensations such as pain, cold, and hunger. So that can also lead to a lot of being abused in certain situations or harassed. Do not make any worthwhile contributions to society and therefore are viewed as less valuable. I think that's very common. It's like a capitalist model. It's like, what can they do for me? Like, what do they do instead of just taking tax money and living with a nurse or caretaker and that's it? So why are they around? What are they doing? That idea is really dehumanification. And they are incapable of making decisions for themselves. Therefore, they should not be allowed to control their finances, own a home, develop serious emotional relationships, experience normal sexual feelings, or control their own reproductive decisions. So, yeah, wasn't always the case in the history in the past. So this. It's also led to discrimination, and Lesley can talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, so across the board, disabled people are severely underemployed or unemployed, even though they would like to work and are capable of doing so. A lot of bias in the workplaces make that difficult. If they are in a job, they do have more challenges in promoting and advancing in their career. And you can see these other just things that most of us take for granted: having appropriate, safe, accessible housing, accessing healthcare system, communication support, free and appropriate public education, and pursue post-secondary education, which is what we are all about. And that definitely relates to our research. So neurodivergence in particular have a lot of misinformation based on research from mid-20th century through the end of the 20th century. Autism was historically considered a white boy's disorder. And that was mostly because if a white boy wasn't interacting, wasn't showing aggression, doing the things that typical white boys might do, the parents and physicians saw it as a problem. If girls were antisocial, soft-spoken, maybe very shy, they were seen as just being girls, when some of them probably were autistic and never diagnosed. So the result of having the stereotype of what they would call extreme maleness, and by that they were talking about white males. Other demographics are severely underdiagnosed. So women, many women in the last decade or so, grown women, adults, have been diagnosed with autism. And in a lot of cases, they had children who were identified by the school or maybe by their own parents as possibly autistic or on the spectrum. And the mother of the children recognizes herself in the behaviors of those children and ultimately gets diagnosed. But when she was growing up, her behaviors were not identified by educators and family members. So the media definitely supports the stereotype of a white man's disorder. We think about the Rain Man, we think about Sheldon, this picture here, and a lot of other TV series and specials and movies that the autistic person is usually a white male. Another misinformation piece is this idea of mind blindness. One of the key diagnostic indicators is this conception that an autistic person, this is also called the theory of the mind, cannot empathize with others, cannot begin to perceive what's happening in another person's mind. And so that was considered an autistic trait. And that this is definitely the medical model, the deficit model, because recent research shows that neurotypical individuals can empathize with other neurotypical individuals, but not autistics. They have found that autistics can empathize and understand the minds of other autistics. The disconnect occurs when neurotypicals try to understand the minds of autistics or vice versa. So I always knew that my son never had mind blindness. He's an extremely empathetic individual, majored in social work, has a master's in social work, and now is working on his master's in Native American studies. Always empathetic and wanting to help. And then the most popular treatment for autism has been applied behavioral analysis, ABA. And ABA is it's a procedure in which the therapist will withhold attention, withhold affection, withhold something that the individual wants until the individual conforms to neurotypical behavior. And and then reward if the individual shows neurotypical behavior. And so the children who had the ABA treatment, who are now young adults or middle adults, talk about that time of their life as being abused, and that they have trauma from applied behavioral analysis, and it is definitely losing its favor. Its founder, Dr. Lovas, was also involved in gay conversion therapy.
Disability strengths, we're finally at the more positive slides. Society should shift from the medical model that is very deficit-based thinking to the social model that's more asset-based thinking. So what can everybody, like humanity, your classroom, your group, like what can be added by having people with disability in there? And so we have new ideas, unique experiences, new perspectives, new ways of thinking, different ways of doing it. It's like, yes, that might work for 90% of the people or 20% of the people, but it doesn't work for me. So it's it kind of forces you to look at a different way of doing things, and to also hear new ideas of things that you have maybe never thought about. It's like, oh yeah, it's true, you could do that. Or yeah, that is a problem. what was once an accommodation can benefit everyone. There's actually quite a lot of accommodations out there that started as accommodations, like the curb cuts and the audiobooks, but then everybody benefited from it. So you don't have to be blind or hard of visually impaired to like audiobooks. Maybe you're driving your car, maybe you're cooking, maybe you're cleaning, and you can listen to the book at the same time. So you can benefit from some of the accommodations. Better developed senses. A lot of this disabilities mentioned that specific senses or cognitive diversity goes hand in hand. So like maybe they notice something more than others. For example, there's some statistics. Please don't ask me for the source because I didn't look it up. I just thought of it. But I read when I was taking the class for deaf culture, that deaf drivers are actually very much good drivers. Like a lot of people without disabilities might think that, oh, we shouldn't allow deaf people to drive. That's dangerous. You need to hear. And it's actually proven that it's less dangerous. They're less distracted and they're in accidents less commonly than somebody who can hear. So it's actually sometimes better to focus just on seeing, maybe. They have better attention to detail, better pattern recognition, and interest in the ground truth. And they also have a unique relationship to each other, no matter the country. So if you're a deaf person, an American deaf person, and you go to, I don't know, Ghana or something, and you meet a deaf person here, you don't speak the same language, but you have a lot in common. And so there's something that can connect with you, even though the culture is completely different and the language is completely different. But there are some experiences that are the same. Leslie's going to talk more about neurodivergent.
Yeah, so there's some similar and also some unique advantages for neurodivergent folks. For ADHD or ADD, and these are all research-based, tend to be creative, original, and have flexible thinking. So this image here relates to a study that was done with people with ADHD. And their task was to create a unique fruit from another planet. Over here on this side were the neurotypical people. So you can see that these are obviously cherries. This is obviously a strawberry, a banana, pomegranate, probably. They took what was already there and switched it up. The ADHDers made completely unique and new kinds of fruit. So this idea of not relying on what's already there to come up with something really creative. Dyslexics tend to have the ability to make connections between seemingly disparate ideas. With autism, very much attention to detail, pattern thinking, authenticity, original solutions to problems. There's a really interesting study that they're less susceptible to cognitive biases and social pressures. So some of those typical classic social pressure studies that they've done, that you put people in a room and there's one person who's not in on it and everyone is saying, oh yeah, I like that pink wall, but the wall is actually blue. And ultimately a neurotypical person will cave and say, yeah, I see a blue wall too. Autistic person will never do that. Something that's really important to know in autism is this idea of masking. And last year's one book was Laziness Does Not Exist by Devin Price, who is a psychology professor, PhD. And he also wrote Unmasking Autism, talking about why autistic people mask and what the effects are. So it's basically a coping mechanism to try to blend in, usually due to being excluded by allistics. It can take the form of, so basically they're masking as neurotypical. So they study what a neurotypical person facial expression is, or the cadence of a sentence, or maybe memorize a dialogue exchange from a movie or from a television show. So they can get away with that for a while, but it's an immense cognitive load. And I've read that in books and also in people that I've talked to, that it takes so much energy to fake it that ultimately they experience what's called an autistic shutdown or meltdown and have to be in isolation or have other following disorders from that. I'd like to share something that one of my students from spring semester wrote. This was not prompted. This was a free write. He was one of my autistic students. So I'm going to share a different screen for a moment to give you a sense of what it's like. So he says, they need support, and I wonder how many of them actually get it. In this world which is not built with disabilities in mind, how many are left to struggle as they try to deal with the frustration burning in their soul? How many try their hardest again and again to carve out a niche for themselves to no avail? As I struggle myself, slowly learning what love means and how to keep up my end of a dialogue, I can't do anything. In a way, I'm still caught in that old fog, unable to fully escape as its cold claws at my bones, constantly repeating to learn despite what was denied to me. And I could still remember how much I'd crumbled as I'd gotten older, unable to understand what was being talked about around me, unable to truly assign meaning to many of the things I deal with. I knew I was bad and I regretted it even, but it didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I lashed out and often try and communicate to be heard despite the darkness and isolation. Whew. That's heavy, very poignant. I did get his permission to share that. So we've talked a lot about these different disabilities. We do have some recommendations that we'd like to share with you based on our research. Kerstin's going to start.
Well, their recommendations are in no specific order, which means none of them is like the most important one. You should do that first or something like that. Try to do whatever works for you and what you think you can easily do and what is important to you. We have exercise, empathy, and compassion. Not I can relate to you, but I hear and see you. Often it just matters that somebody cares or is aware of something. Be aware of the heavy cognitive load of constantly monitoring others' responses, like we talked about with masking. Be aware of the vast amount of time it may take for disabled students to complete homework. The accommodations, I think, stop at times 2, double the time, but it could be much, much harder for like certain homework. And the double time just counts for quizzes and exams. Offer flexibility, options in assignment and lectures. Don't necessarily assume that everything needs to be one thing. Maybe you do only quizzes in your class and that's it, but that doesn't really work for everybody with time, let's say timed quizzes. So if you can, let students maybe choose the how they can demonstrate their learning. Like in a writing class, it will be hard. They have to do writing, obviously. But maybe in a different class, they can write an essay, or they can do a video, or they can even draw something and write a short summary or something like that. So think about what could be the same. Also with lectures, I noticed as a student that's, for example, that a lot of online classes are all reading or all videos. And I personally hate videos. That's not working for me, videos. So if the class is only videos, and especially no captioning with videos, it's going to be tough for me. And I do so much better in classes that have captioning, or just have lectures with reading, or they have transcripts available and I don't even have to look at the video. That's much better. So think about flexibility. Be patient about requests to repeat, rephrase information and instructions. So it's not that they try to annoy you or anything like that. Strive not just for accommodations, but inclusivity. So don't just think about like, oh, I'm not supposed to do that, or I'm only asked to offer this. That's the minimum you're asked to do through accommodations. I can really think about how can you make sure that everybody's included, even the ones that don't have paperwork, maybe. Learn more about universal design. That's a key phrase as well. That means universal design. Everybody can access anything online or in PowerPoint or in PDF or something. Also get to know Canvas better. There's a lot of things that you can do in Canvas to make something more easily accessible, but some instructors do not know Canvas very well. Canvas can have really a lot of functions, a lot of cool functions, but it's hard if you're not aware of them to use them. So what is being learned? How can it be learned in this situation, and why should it be learned? Think about these 3 questions when you think about how you want to design something, like what should it become? So that you don't always end up with the same thing. It's like, oh, everything is a PowerPoint. It's just like, that's your thing. It's fine. It's easy for you, but some people might really struggle with that. If students don't have a confirmed DX or DSPS paperwork, still address their concerns. For whatever reason, they don't want to go to DSPS, but mention maybe that this video doesn't have captioning or anything like that. They struggle with the time or something like that. Send them away and say like, oh, go to DSPS. I can't do anything otherwise for you. Lesley, you want to do the rest? The next slide?
Sure. Yeah. I had a student in a synchronous Zoom class last semester who was not hooked into DSPS, but told me that she had extreme anxiety and could not be in a breakout room. And, in a synchronous class, that's how they participate. And so we talked, and we decided that in the discussion boards, she would do double the responses to classmates so that she was still interacting in some way. Second part, let students know about DSPS. So when we say recommendations, we're not necessarily talking to you as individuals. You have to do these things. Some of these are broader on an organizational level, like a lot of our rooms at CRC are not ADA compliant. They don't have the best design choices when it comes to the ability to enter and exit rooms. Some of the rooms have so many desks, make it really difficult for someone in a wheelchair. We recommend that you let students know about disability-centered clubs. It would be great to have a disability center and a sensory room. I know those are big asks, but I'm going to show you a place that does have those. Do reach out to DSPS and experts, and keep in mind that they are extremely understaffed. So for sensory friendly, fluorescent lights are particularly difficult. distractive visuals, sudden noises. I know we do a lot of clapping, but maybe have a culture of sparkle fingers or snaps. Last semester, I had a student who let me know that she has ADHD and that it really helps her if she has one earbud that is playing music that kind of keeps her focused. So I have on the one of these last slides some books that are very recent, very well researched, that I recommend. And also one of the opportunities, professional development opportunities, was a workshop I went to called Queering the Spectrum. And I really loved this supporting autistic students. So what I did is I put the link to the website Affirming Neurodiversity, and it has what you should know about autistic students and what to do to help them have the best experience as possible. So that's available to you. I had the opportunity during their spring break last spring to visit the Disability Center at Sac State. And I took some pictures while I was there. The lovely coordinator, Yolanda, and I showed us around, and it was a big space that had couches, a big screen TV, separate rooms for different purposes. One of them was a sensory room with low lighting, fidget toys. And it's brand new, so it can be done. And Kerstin, do you want to talk about what they can do to learn more?
Sure. So this is our last slide, and we finally ran through everything. If that topics interests you in some way, then here's some ideas of what you could do. We have a creating accessible course content here at CRC. That's a Canvas course. I took it a while ago. Was it 8 weeks? 6 weeks? I don't even know, but that might be, we can do that. That might be too much for you, but remember, we also have as time commitment goes, it might be too much for you, but you can also call into the Canvas and Technology office hour that and spend like 10 minutes asking specific questions like, how do I make my PowerPoint more accessible or something like that? Or how do I make quizzes more accessible? You might be aware that we have Pope Technology app in Canvas, so you can find it under setting, and then you need to go to navigation and make it actually available on the navigation. So you're going to activate it, and then you go to page, then you actually run the app, and it will tell you what pages have issues with accessibility. And it's different than the one that's always at the bottom. You know, like this weird guy that stands like this and tells you accessibility, whether a page when you're writing is accessible or not. Well, Pope Technology is different and finds different issues. So ideally you would check both, I guess. Recommend Social Justice Course 320, Introduction to Disability Studies, or similar courses. If you hear interest from somebody, maybe mention something like that. This is our first semester at CRC with this course, and it's a lot of people who have enrolled. It's completely full. There's very few colleges right now that offer such a course. So if people are looking, you can mention CRC and this course, for example. Do you want to do the last 3, Lesley?
Sure. Yeah. So it's always great to hear people's stories. I think that always helps us to have more empathy and understanding. So thank you for coming today and hearing some of those. DSPS is so great. They really helped us with some information we needed for a sabbatical, and they do so much for students. So don't hesitate to reach out to them with a specific challenge. and support the creation of disability-centered clubs, disability center, and a sensory room. So we have about 3 minutes left. Anyone would like to ask questions or share an experience related to today's topic?
You can just unmute yourself and ask the question. Don't be shy. Thanks for coming. And yes, I'm a big activist, or like I love universal design. So whoever works on that will will notice that. Thanks for coming. Thanks for putting up with us. We talked a lot. And like I said, the presentation is online. Go ahead.
Was a comment and a question. Well, first of all, it was really great and really helpful presentation. So thank you both. I was really fascinated to hear about the applied behavior analysis and what you said about like the abuse. I was just curious to know, because I feel like I'm kind of embarrassed I didn't know that. And I teach early childhood education, so there's a lot of parallels with like behavior and guidance of behavior.
Yes. Yeah. So basically, the children are learning you don't have a voice until you do what that adult wants you to do. Right? I didn't put that together myself either until I read about it.
Do you have any like extended reading around that I could look at, or?
Yes. Yes. In fact, yes. Melissa, let me write your name down. Are you at CRC? Okay. I will email you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your interest. Eddie?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that same idea that a lot of times it seems like those with the most ability to communicate with others are making these statements, and that we don't know for the vast majority of those that can't communicate if this thing is actually beneficial for them. So like, I would guess like a pinch of caution when we only have those that can communicate saying, oh, this point.
Absolutely. I love how you articulated that. Yeah, I mean, some people have compared it to dog training, which really, I mean, it's like you've got that thing there, leave it. And so I don't know, it's just, it was shocking to me too. That's not to say that the people who are trained and do the ABA are bad people at all. It's at one time it was considered the gold standard, and it is still being done. So it's nice to be enlightened of the people who received it, what their opinions are.
Okay.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you for
Appreciate
coming.
the audience.
Thanks,
Hope
it
you
was
have a great
great.
start to the semester. Thanks. Thank you.